A priestess recites the ancient texts of Worldbuilding over the perpetual chant of the Eternals. As the people of the small village of Elwood listen, one man prays, pleading the Eternals for the safe return of his daughter, as she adventures far beyond the bounds of these lands. In creating worlds, the role of the gods are important to consider. Do you have gods, or is yours a world without? What system of gods do you use, and how do they interact with the world and the immediate story? Hello, I am Ian, the Loremaster. Today we are going to be discussing gods and deities, specifically what systems can be used to establish the gods you wish to make. Without further ado, let's talk gods. When creating your gods, there are several things to consider. Chief among these is the amount of gods you want for the world. This leads to three major systems of gods to study. Those are the single god system, the Pantheon system, and what I call the Mega Pantheon system. As an aside, always remember that diversity builds a believable world. When considering the system of gods you wish to utilize, try to find ways to diversify the world among the gods and around the gods. It is better to use multiple systems that are used throughout and within differing cultures. This will help you avoid the problem of building a bland world where it feels flat, rather than creating a world where it's like, oh yeah, everyone worships Tiamat, except the elves. They worship Thor for some reason. You can instead create one with real depth and a full belief system. While an interesting setup on its own, just making Thor elves doesn't reflect a believable world. We begin with the single god system. In this system, you create one entity that is considered godly by a group of peoples. Whether this entity is the creator of the world or simply worshipped is irrelevant. The point is that a religion of some sort is built around the worship of the one god. This is both useful and difficult to utilize well. Beginning with the good, with only one god, you only need one name that can be extrapolated into multiple words within the religion. Naming is one of the most fun yet most frustrating things in world building, so having one named god helps lighten the load. A single god also means a single main religion. Though offshoots are possible, one god and religion means you can focus on making it the most fleshed out fictional religion possible. Nothing can stop you, so have fun. And finally, the single god can be made to be more memorable and interesting to the plot of the story, as it's easier to remember one person over a larger group. Now to the bad. A single god is difficult to work with in isolation, as it becomes increasingly impossible to have every culture follow the same god in a believable sense without breaking it off into separate religions. With only one god, you may start to feel restricted by the system. One god can only encompass so many qualities. Branching off too far from a core belief may make a religion seem chaotic or underdeveloped. Compounding the problem, a god who does attempt to encompass everything only really works well in very specific worlds, such as worlds where chaos is common, or where cultures have split the religion so far that the one god has several depictions. As an example of a game that uses a single god system well, let's take a look at the Dragon Age franchise. BioWare created Dragon Age with great attention to the lore, especially with the creation of their religions, most notably the Chantry of Andraste, which is a single god religion. The Chantry, a primarily human religion, follows the teachings of Andraste, a martyr who is known as the Bride of the Maker. The Maker is the creator god that is believed by the Chantry to have created all things before abandoning the world due to the sins of mortals. The main beliefs are that the Maker will return when all peoples renounce their evil and believe in only the Maker, and that magic is a corrupting force on the world. The religion itself follows these teachings through the Chant of Light, chants detailing the life of Andraste, with the organized chantry made up of many ranks of female priestesses, following the precedent of Andraste herself. Their teachings are spread through quotes from the chant and, in extreme cases, the exalted marches, where the chantry forcibly destroys enemies of the Maker, including other religious groups. This has led to conflicts with the other races, who are thought to be beneath humanity due to their worship of other gods. It is in this conflict with the other gods of the Elven Pantheon, with the worship of the stone by the dwarves, and the philosophy of the Kun with the Qunari, that the chantry has been mostly fleshed out. The chantry is a good example for a single god system due to the nature of the world it is in and its connections to the cultures within the world. It isn't isolated as the only religion, which means it can create conflict, the basis to any plot. Overall, the single god system is a great system for creating fleshed-out religions that follow the god. The god itself is also able to be focused on to create a real character with depth. However, the difficulty comes with how one god interacts with the cultures. Works best when it can interact with other deity systems. Now we move to the Pantheon system. While the single god system was focused on one god, the Pantheon system deals with many. This is one of the most common systems in fiction, as it allows for more godly figures to exist, thus more potential for conflict. In truth, there are several pros and cons, as would be expected. Starting with the good, the Pantheon system allows for freedom of choice. If you want a specific god, you can create them and fit them into the Pantheon in some way. A pantheon of gods can also be diverse within a single culture and across multiple cultures. Maybe the humans of the world do all worship the same gods, just some more frequently than others, depending on the culture. There is also inspiration everywhere. Most ancient mythologies in the real world are a pantheon-based system. From Greek to Norse, Egyptian, Japanese, Aztec, and all, there's always somewhere to look for ideas. Moving to the bad, there could potentially be too many gods. Making a pantheon is about balancing the number of gods with their importance to the plot. Make sure to avoid creating useless gods who aren't needed. Making a coherent pantheon may also be difficult. A religion that follows a god of wild parties will not likely also follow the god of somber law as well. However, building in these differences may be used to diversify the religion as a whole. How does one religion hold all of these gods? And finally, it's common that within a pantheon, only a few of the gods are actually focused on, to aid in the understanding of the plot. This will likely leave some gods underdeveloped, which may make your players or readers feel like they're irrelevant. The fact that some gods are more developed than others is not in itself an issue. For example, it makes sense for Kratos and the gods he interacts with in God of War to be fleshed out while the lesser gods are left unmentioned. While the God of War franchise is a good example of Pantheon systems, it is based on real mythology. Instead, we'll look at the Elder Scrolls series and how they use pantheons. There are two major pantheons in the Elder Scrolls, the Imperial Pantheon of the Nine Divines, or 8 if you're nasty, and the Daedric Princes. Beginning with the Nine Divines, they are the most commonly worshipped gods in Tamriel, in one form or another. Each of the Divines represents different aspects of life, and each were developed to best show these aspects. The Divines include Akatosh, dragon god of time, Arche, god of the cycle of life and death, Dibella, goddess of beauty, Julianos, god of wisdom, Kinnereth, goddess of air, wind, and sky, Mara, goddess of love, Stendar, god of mercy and justice, Talos, god of mankind, and Zenithar, god of commerce. While each of the 9 are developed gods, Akatosh and Talos are likely the most developed due to their importance to the plot of the games, specifically Oblivion and Skyrim. The Daedric Princes are another matter entirely. Although a collection of princes, the Daedra are not worshipped together as a single pantheon. Rather, each one is worshipped by their own cults. This has made them each extremely recognizable from each other, especially for the fact that each of the princes can be interacted with and communicated to directly in the games. Although there are 16 Daedric princes, some have been shown to be more important to the plot than others. Azura, Prince of the Dawn, Dusk, and the Stars, is integral to the plot of Morrowind. Mehrunes Dagon, Prince of Destruction, and Sheogorath, Prince of Madness, are both major in Oblivion. Hermaeus Mora, Prince of Knowledge, is a constant presence during the Dragonborn DLC of Skyrim. And Molag Bal, Prince of Domination, is the primary antagonist in the base game of The Elder Scrolls Online. The Elder Scrolls shows two styles of well-developed pantheons, an organized religion and an unconnected grouping. One allows for a sense of connectiveness between the gods, where each works with one another harmoniously, while the other allows for each god to be independent and have more personality or specificity. There are other gods in Tamriel, of course, but the lore for many of these in and of themselves is rather complicated. I'm looking at you, Vivek. Overall, the Pantheon system is a common system for a good reason. The biggest problem is making sure that every god you create matters so that the players care to look into them. Making too many gods is a dangerous path that may lead to unforeseen issues, so make sure that your Pantheon works by limiting yourself of what gods you're going to use. And finally, last but definitely not least, we have the Mega Pantheon. Remember how I just said to limit your gods? For the Mega Pantheon, just forget I said that. This is the no-holds-barred approach to gods, pulling out all the stops to make the most of your Pantheon. Here, there are no limits, nothing holding you back. Make every god you could dream of because your world deserves it. Who cares about the pros and cons when there are just so many gods? I do. I care. So, the good. To quote Emperor Palpatine here, unlimited power. With the Mega Pantheon, you can truly make whatever god or however many gods you want. See something you like from other media? Copy it, but change it up a bit so it doesn't look like it's obvious that you copied. But don't actually do that because plagiarism is a serious issue. But you can have fun with it. Don't worry if no one cares about your god of puppies, you had fun writing about them, so that's what matters. There will also always be enough gods to make every culture diverse and interesting. By the nature of the Mega Pantheon, you can create different religions that follow different parts of the Mega Pantheon. However, there are, of course, some bad things. You will be overwhelmed. Your players will be overwhelmed. No one will remember all the gods, and that's okay. Just make sure not to dump them all out at once, or it'll be far too overwhelming. Small doses of gods can introduce a Mega Pantheon slowly and with less issue. Eventually, you will also run out of ideas. How do you create 754 gods to have unique attributes and personalities? Even if you do, how do you create names for all 754 of them? If this becomes an issue, then subdivide your Mega Pantheon into sections, organized by personality types or godly attributes, and work in smaller segments. Most of the gods will also not interact with the plot. Even if you had fun making your puppy god and all the players decide to follow them, fitting the puppy god into the plot will be difficult going against all the other possible gods you've created. Once again, this is okay. Not every god needs to be center stage, and a roster of supporting gods is just as important. As the final example of a godly system, we need to look at Warcraft. Although I love the lore that Blizzard has created, in some cases they went a bit overboard. The many, countless deities they've introduced are one of those cases. To begin, we have the Light and the Void, primeval energies that brought about the entire universe. There is some indication that they are sentient forces, as the Void can manifest itself as the Void Lords, and as such are considered potential gods. Next, we have the Titans, the most well-known godly beings in WoW, made from the souls of planets. These guys go around and mold planets to their will. Generally, they're pretty important. After that, we have the Old Gods. They're parasitic manifestations of the Void that seek to corrupt all things, very Lovecraftian-type gods. Then we have Elune, a right and proper goddess with no explanation as to how she exists. Unlike the others on the list, Elune isn't seemingly a godly creature, but is considered a real god. Rounding off the interplanetary god creatures, we have the Naru, beings born of the light who seek to end the void. Finally, we get to the gods specific to Azeroth. There's the wild gods, who each represent a group of animals, such as Galdrin for wolves. There's the troll Loa, where each of the tribes of trolls follow different gods. The dragon aspects, leaders of the dragonflight, such as Alexstrasza and Ysera, are all considered godly, and of course the Titan Keepers, creations of the Titans made to watch over Azeroth, are also considered godly. Oh, and there's you, the player. You may as well be considered a god, as you've at one point either fought, killed, or worked alongside many of the real gods. In the end, Warcraft has well over 120 gods that are interacted with on varied levels. It's a lot, but they are introduced over time in separate groups. Overall, the Mega Pantheon is a fun, if a bit ridiculous system for organizing your gods. The key is dividing them up. In a way, the Mega Pantheon is an extension of the previous two systems, just with far more gods than is absolutely necessary. Each of these three systems has its benefits and its drawbacks. When building the world, it is important to find ways to diversify the cultures, and religion is one of these ways. Use the different systems together to create conflicts and make the plot move forward, but never forget to have fun when making the world you build. We'll continue next week as I pull a MatPat and make a part 2 based on the actual creation of gods and how the gods can be used in a story or a campaign. As always, I've been Loremaster Ian. Thank you, and have a wonderful world-building week. As a quick little bit here at the end, I want to say a few things. Firstly, thank you again for watching and interacting with the channel. It means a lot to all of us in Hijack when we see you guys asking questions and giving input, so please continue doing so. If you have questions or ideas for episodes of our various shows, feel free to let us know. Secondly, I think of this show as a kind of jumping off point. I make these episodes as a place for people to begin to think about their worlds they build, so they can get the initial push forward. Starting is always the hardest part, so I want to help with that as much as I can. So for now, the first season of Wonderful World Building will be focused on basics and wide-sweeping questions rather than the more intricate details of world building. Eventually, it may move into answering the nitty-gritty questions, but for now it's going to stay big picture. There are many resources online, a lot of places where I get ideas. We never really work in isolation, so look around. I recommend a channel called Hello Future Me, who does a lot of things and good detailed analysis on world building, including an episode on pantheons. It's good work. Anyway, thanks again, and keep writing.